I'm the senior pastor here at Galloway, and on behalf of the family that is Galloway, we are thrilled that you are here, and we are delighted to be partnering in hosting the book festival again, because Galloway believes that the Mississippi Book Festival is very important for our state, not only in terms of literacy and capturing the imagination, but also because of the breadth of ideas that are on display here today. We think that's important. So thank you for being a part of that, and we hope that you'll come visit us any Sunday.
Good afternoon and welcome to this iteration of the Mississippi Book Festival. I'm Peyton Prosper on the board, and we are deeply grateful to Galloway Methodist Church to allow us to use this fantastic sanctuary year in, year out. So thank you, Carrie. A couple of housekeeping. Please silence cell phones. It can be disturbing, and it's just a courtesy we would like to insist upon. And we couldn't do this without any number of sponsors, many of whom are listed in your program. But for this particular program, it is the Eudora Welty Foundation, which is a wonderful organization, institution. And we have here today its chair, Holmes Adams, my great friend from Greenville, Mississippi, and a distinguished lawyer. So Holmes, I would like to turn this over to you to introduce our panel today.
Thank you very much, Peyton. Well, on behalf of the Welty Foundation, I want to add our welcome to all of you this afternoon. We're pleased to see so many people here. The mission of the Eudora Welty Foundation is to preserve Eudora's literary legacy. And through events just like this, we hope to encourage both writers and readers of good literature. One of my family's all-time favorite children's books is Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. Now, I would imagine that most of you have read this, but if your memory is as dim as mine, let me refresh you that it's about a spider named Charlotte who saves a pig named Wilbur from slaughter, and she does it by writing words in her web. Some pig, terrific, humble. Now, I want to use an expression that my priest uses on Sunday morning. At this point, she would say, well, now roll with me a little bit here, because I want to read you the very last paragraph from Charlotte's Web. Wilbur never forgot Charlotte. Although he loved her children and grandchildren dearly, none of the new spiders ever quite took her place in his heart. She was in a class by herself. It is not often that someone comes along who is a true friend and a good writer. Charlotte was both. And I'm here today to testify that that phrase, a good friend and a good writer, applies to Ann Patchett. She has been a devoted friend of the Eudora Welty Foundation for many, many years, and a good friend of this book festival since its inception. She is in a class by herself. To say she is a good writer is an understatement. She is an extraordinary writer, the author of 9 novels, 3 books of nonfiction, 2 children's books, and countless articles in papers and magazines across the country. Her latest book, Tom Lake, came out on the 1st of this month, and the New Yorker has devoted 3 pages to a review of the book and to Ann's career to some extent. Ann is also a special friend to young writers and new writers. And with her today is Lindsay Lynch, who is a colleague of Anne's at Lindsay is a colleague of Anne's at Parnassus Books in Nashville. And her debut novel, Do Tell, has come out to great reviews. And perhaps you've seen her. She was interviewed on the Today Show by Hoda and Jenna not too long ago. So please join me in welcoming Anne Patchett and Lindsay Lynch.
Golly, Holmes, thank you. I never reread the end of Charlotte's Web because it makes me cry. Thank you all for being here and this wonderful, wonderful place on this scorching hot day. And the last time I was in this church, it was to listen to Angie Thomas. And that was a spectacular event. I'm always glad to be back in Jackson. I'm not always glad to be back here in August. But we get what we get. And also to be part of a festival that not only touches on Welty's legacy, but celebrates writers and celebrates great booksellers. And there are so many here, the iconic Lemuria, but then Lindsay just brought us to...
Friendly City Books.
Yeah.
They had a dog.
They had a dog named Scarlet.
That sounds right.
It was the tiny, overheated beagle named Scarlet. And I just think anybody in this day and age who's willing to open up a brand new independent bookstore so that a dog can have a job, those are the people that warm my heart.
Parnassus Books, putting dogs to work since 2011.
It's true. All the time I meet dogs when I'm out walking and I'm like, hey, do you want a job? And I'm not looking up at all to see who is with the dog. Okay, so I'm going to tell you our origin story and why Lindsay and I are here together. And then we're going to talk about our books, and we're going to read just the tiniest little bit, and we're going to take questions, and that's the program. So Lindsay came into Parnassus Books what year?
2014.
2014. How old were you?
Like 23, maybe 24.
Maybe 23, maybe 22. Anyway.
I was 15 years old.
It felt like you were 15 years old. And so Lindsay had just graduated from Kenyon College. And why did we hire you? I can't remember.
Part-time seasonal help. Who knew?
Yeah, and from part-time seasonal help, we're now on book tour together. Wait, I'm going to open my water.
Yeah, if you ever want to be an author, it's just a casual journey of 10 years of working at an independent bookstore. I added a year, I don't know, maybe for the stress of the pandemic.
Well, and also you took some time off. You went
did.
away, you left us. We had a big party, a big going away party for you, and then you came back, bad penny that you are.
I'm going to keep leaving, so you have to throw me parties.
That's right. So Lindsay went off to graduate school, and then she came back. And when you own an independent bookstore, a lot of the people that work in bookstores want to be writers. And over the years, I've had a lot of people who work in the store ask me if I will read their work and mark it up. And I always say yes, I'm happy to, but here's the deal. The deal is I am not a good teacher. And the reason I am not a good teacher is I can tell you how to make something better. I can tear it to shreds and really push you and make you a better writer, but I don't know how to be kind. And I don't know how to, it's really true. Like, I just...
You're very kind.
I'm very kind, but I don't know how to say, oh, this line of dialogue is really excellent. Like, I don't know how to make you feel good.
It's called a compliment sandwich. You do something nice, you do something mean, you do something nice.
I know, but mine were inverted, so I did something mean and then a little bit nice and then mean. So in the history of owning Parnassus Books, which will be 12 years in November, hey, bookstores, yeah. I've had a lot of employees who have given me stories, and no one has ever given me a second story. No one has ever come back, and a lot of times they've just quit, except for Lindsay. And I explained to Lindsay what my problem was. I was like, I can help you, I can maybe make you better, but I can't build you up emotionally. I can only tell you how to make your story better. And Lindsay was the only person who was like, bring it on. And I did, and I would give her a story, and it would be marked up, and then 2 days later, you would come back.
I'm a glutton for punishment. I kept the pages that she marked up.
That's really adorable. And she got into graduate school with her short stories, which I thought were good. And she always laughs when I said that, but I thought they were very good.
I spent 2 days ragging on my own short stories.
Well, you know, the thing is, and this is true for me, I wrote short stories all through college and graduate school, and as soon as I wrote a novel, I was like, oh, I'll never write another short story.
I'm right there with you. I think everything I thought I liked about writing short stories is actually things I like about writing essays, and that's probably for the best.
Exactly. It's like once I wrote a novel, I thought, this is my form, and this is where I feel comfortable, and I couldn't squash myself back into that smaller space. I think all the time how great it would be to write short stories every now and then. Note to self.
Yeah, it sounds great. 2,000 words? That sounds lovely. But I've seen the promised land, and I'm not going back.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So Lindsay went off to graduate school. Tell us about your journey in writing Do Tell.
A journey it has been. So I started researching this book while I was supposed to be writing those short stories in grad school. I went to grad school at University of Wyoming. An important thing to note about Wyoming, which I'm sure in August in Mississippi, this is gonna sound really nice, but I promise you, 9 months of winter with a below 10-degree wind chill, not great. Not great for being a person, but great if you wanna absolutely lose your mind and pretend like you live in Golden Age Hollywood, which is what happened to me. I did a deep dive into Golden Age Hollywood. At first, I was joking. I'm like, I'm writing Hollywood fan fiction. Isn't that funny? And then it quickly turned into, oh no, I am actually writing a novel. And I didn't tell people for most of my program, which, funnily enough, I wasn't the only person in my program who did this. There's another writer, Jenny Tingwei Zhang, who wrote Four Treasures of the Sky, which is gorgeous. You should read it. It'll make you cry, but it's worth it. She had a similar thing. She was in my cohort. She was supposed to be writing personal essays. Our last semester, both of us were like, so I'm writing historical fiction. And where to go from there? I worked at bookstores after grad school. I was trying to make the novel work. I was getting rejected by literary agents. I was rewriting the novel. Suddenly it was a pandemic and I was rewriting the novel. And all of those, the rejection part, all of that happened in such isolation. So to come on the other side and come back to Parnassus and start getting those, like, first there were small yeses, and then there were bigger and bigger yeses, and to be able to celebrate that at the bookstore is just so special.
Yeah, I also think that so many people who want to make art are sensitive. We have those two things together in our minds. If you have feelings, and there's a certain fragility around the idea of art that is absolutely not sustainable. The people who make it in any kind of art are the people who can get piles and piles of rejection and keep picking themselves up, because that's what making art is. It really is just piles of rejection that you have to kind of keep picking yourself up and know what your own compass is. Like, you have so many people telling you that you need to change and do things in a different way, and some of them you have to listen to, and some of them you have to ignore, and figuring out what the difference is between those two things can be really difficult.
Yeah, especially when you're so conditioned from a young age to be a good student. When somebody gives you advice, you take the advice. You want to be the A+ student, but when it comes to writing, like, I had to learn how to be the worst student in order to write this book.
Okay, I said this in the car. We did a program in Memphis, and I said this in the car. I've got to remember to tell you the story about Sissy and Sydney. I'm just going to tell you the story about Sissy and Sydney because it's so interesting, and it figures into this. Sissy and Sydney also work in the bookstore, and I was in the bookstore one Sunday morning, and it was just the three of us in the back room, me, Sissy, Sydney. And, oh, I knew what it was. I had to sign 23,000 tip sheets. Now, what's a tip sheet, you might ask? This copy of Tom Lake has a little gold sticker on the front that says, signed first edition. Well, what that means is they sent me, hold on. This is actually interesting.
Do you need me to Vanna White this?
No, I got it. So they sent me 23,000 pieces of paper that were these. And I signed them in my dining room, and then I mailed them back. And I've done this before, and then in production, they sew them into the books, and then they ship them to bookstores. This is going to segue nicely into all the things that authors who work at bookstores know. The reason that you want to have tip sheets is because, say you're a little bookstore and you want to order Ann Patchett's new novel, you want 4 copies. But if you want signed copies, you have to buy a case. That's 12 copies. That's why you sign tip sheets. So I signed, I think it was 500 a day, and I had 3 months to do it, and I just regularly go in and do my work. So I'm in the store one Sunday morning with Sissy and Sydney, and I'm talking about these tip sheets. And Sid says, if I had to sign 23,000 tip sheets, I would start at 11 o'clock at night, the night before they were all due. I would take half a bottle of Adderall. At 4 o'clock in the morning, I would go to the hospital to have my stomach pumped, and then I would enter a deep depression. And Sissy turns around and says, that's so interesting. That's exactly what I'd do too. And I said, this is fascinating. And then the three of us got into this conversation, and what they said is that they were both the smartest kid in school. From the time they were in kindergarten up through the beginning of college, they were in all of the advanced classes. Nothing was ever hard for them. And I'm wondering if this is true for you.
Gifted kid burnout.
Gifted kid burnout. It's a thing. But what they told me is they had never learned any work skills. And they were incredible procrastinators because nothing had ever been hard for them in school. And I said, I was always the dumbest kid in my class, which is really true. I mean, it is nothing short of a miracle that I'm not still in 4th grade. And that's why I became a writer, because I was so remedial that I learned how to tell clever stories as a way of getting passed on from grade to grade. I didn't learn how to read till I was in the 3rd grade because my family moved around a lot and nobody ever sent us to school. So it was the 70s, come on. Truancy was the thing. And I said, because I was so behind all the time, I had incredibly good work habits, and the second I walked in from school, I would start my homework, and I worked and worked and worked because that was the only way I could get a C-. And Sissy and Sid both went, you're so lucky. I wish I'd been the dumbest kid in school. If I'd been the dumbest kid in school, I'd own the bookstore now instead of working at a bookstore now. But that's kind of what you're talking about. Like, how do you learn how to be a bad student?
See, I think I was like in the lower half of like the smartest school. I'm a product of DC private schools, which are on a whole different level of, like, the kids I went to school with are gonna run for Congress in the next 5 years. They're famous. One of them just made news lines because he's dating Ariana Grande now, SpongeBob. So like that's the school I went to, and I think I didn't realize that wasn't normal until I got out of college and was like, oh, that really wasn't normal. So I was in like a fish tank of like kids whose parents are literally running the country.
Okay, but did that make you work harder?
Yeah, because I
Yeah.
constantly thought that like I was at the bottom of that fishbowl because I didn't realize it was a fishbowl, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Okay, let's talk about some things that we as booksellers know that other authors don't know.
Yeah, it's certainly on my debut journey. I think I'm an unusual debut author, especially when it came to when the book went out on submission. So I had a literary agent. The book was ready to be sent to editors at publishing houses. So I talked to editors from at least 3 different major publishers. And most debut authors, I think they're just excited to talk to anybody at all, which 100% I was. I wanted at least one editor to talk to me, but having 3, you're usually thinking about like cover treatment, do I like this editor? My current job at Parnassus, I'm the book buyer for adult fiction and nonfiction there. And the things that I stay up late at night thinking about are warehouse efficiency. Most debut authors are probably not going to think about warehouse efficiency, but it matters because
It matters a lot.
if your book goes out of stock, you want to know which publisher is going to get your book back in stock as quick as possible. And there are some there's a wide gap, let's say, between some of the publishers. So there was an editor that I really loved talking to, but I also happen to know that his publisher doesn't have the best warehouse. And I was privileged to have a choice at all and get to talk to more than one editor, but it certainly changes your perspective on things. I don't know how it is for you. I mean, you're with Harper.
And I mean, I think one of the things that I really know from working in a store is, hold your book up, covers, what the covers look like. And when they send you a bad cover, you just say no, and you say this is what the cover is going to be. Also, the titles. Something memorable and something you can see from the other side of the room, something you can remember. Do Tell, Tom Lake. You will notice they sound almost exactly the same, and you can see them from a distance. And if I have mentored Lindsay at all, it was less in writing and more just how to stand up for yourself. So when she got some bad covers, I was like, no. And she was like, well, that's what they want. I was like, I don't care what they want.
Yeah, they tried to send me one with like a man leaning over a woman's shoulder, and I was like, if there's one thing this book isn't, it's a heterosexual romance. I was like, this cover is too straight. I'm so sorry.
Well, not only that, they wanted you to have a different title.
They did.
Gossip.
Yeah, which a beautiful thing about working at a bookstore is that you have a legion of booksellers who are well-read, they are smart, they are creative, and when your publisher tries to give you a crummy title, like Gossip, you can ask the booksellers and say, hey, could you all give me a better title? And you did.
You just hold up the 2 titles, and she came back, she was like, everybody at the bookstore likes Do Tell better than Gossip. Gossip, it's a bad title. And her editor said, no, we like Gossip. And I said, tell them to write those 2 titles down and show it to everybody at Doubleday and have everybody at Doubleday pick one or the other. 100% Do Tell.
It's also a great leveraging tool to be like, well, the booksellers say this. Sometimes I just make up things the booksellers say,
Right.
and I tell my editor,
Absolutely.
like, the booksellers hated that. It was terrible.
Okay, so why don't you tell us what the book is about and give us a little reading, and then I'll do the same thing.
Yeah. So Do Tell is set in Golden Age Hollywood. It follows an actress named Eudora. When we meet her at the start of the novel, Edie is a character actress, because I love character actors and actresses, but she's not a great actress. She's got 3 months left in her contract. Her contract is not getting renewed. What Edie is great at is knowing other people's business. She has been moonlighting as a source for gossip columnists and journalists in Golden Age Hollywood. So when the time comes, Edie is also a child of the Great Depression, so she's always got bills to pay on the mind. She throws her hat in the ring and becomes a gossip columnist herself. In the process, she really ruins a couple of lives. She finds herself in the middle of a very divisive trial when an underage actress from her former studio accuses a top-billed actor of sexual assault. Edie has to make choices. She has to really, really hurt some people and reflect on that. So it's a novel about systems of power, but it's also a novel with everything we love about that era. Glitz and glamour, big parties, famous people being mean to each other. Who doesn't love that?
And there's also some famous people being nice to each other.
The characters in my novel are way meaner than the characters in yours. We can talk about our Nells. But anyways, I'm going to read just a small bit. We're in the second chapter, so there's not too much to do catch up with.
This is my reoccurring nightmare when I'm trying to find the place I'm supposed to read.
It's okay, I got it. I didn't plan beforehand. I've been carrying this book around for 2 hours, and I didn't think to do that. Okay. This is the beginning of chapter 2. In 1931, I wrote into a contest. It was sponsored by Miss Appleton's Hair and Beauty Care. Live like a Hollywood star for a week. I was 19. Applicants had to write an essay about what a week in Hollywood would mean to them. Naturally, I made the entire thing up. My family was poor, but not the kind of poor that the good people of Miss Appleton's Hair and Beauty Care wanted to deal with. So in my letter, I gave my parents a raise and nixed 2 of my 5 siblings. My father became a manager at a soap factory, and my mother stayed home to care for her children. I borrowed some old issues of Photoplay and Screenland from one of our neighbors who was an avid collector. I searched for every advertisement for Miss Appleton's and wrote down the names of the actresses featured in them so I could cite them as my favorite actresses in Hollywood. Finally, I sold a pair of my old shoes, which were supposed to go to my younger sister, to pay for a headshot. The picture would run with an article announcing the winner of the contest. At every train station during the 3-day trip out to Los Angeles, I saw my smiling face in the newspapers. Miss Edith O'Shaughnessy of Boston, Massachusetts, wins the trip of a lifetime. Alongside an ad for Appleton's was a picture of me, grainy from being reprinted in the paper. It wasn't even clear how much care I'd taken to arrange my hair just right. The brief accompanying ad copy included all the lies I told about myself. My week spent living like a Hollywood star involved trolley tours around Paramount and MGM studios. I was permitted to be 100 feet away from Norma Shearer while she filmed a scene on a closed lot. That was fine. What was even better was Miss Appleton's put me up in a decent hotel and let me order food to be sent to my room. It was the only time in my life I'd ever ordered one of everything. I still remember the taste of the ice cream sundae I ate while sprawled on my bed in a hotel robe and slippers. On my last day, I went to FWM Studios and had my face made up by the same woman who regularly worked on Nell Parker and Jeanette Manning. She trained my curls into a neat wave and pinned them for me. I was loaned a few dresses from the costume department and then sent over to a studio where I get to have my picture taken. Everyone was perfectly respectable. The man behind the camera coached me on how to tilt my head and angle my shoulders. They let me try 3 different dresses, and a nice woman told me which jewelry looked best with each one. The dresses weren't even particularly nice, but I'll never forget how I felt when I put them on. Growing up, I had gone straight from wearing children's clothes to house dresses. There had never been a time when I dressed to feel beautiful. When I saw myself in the mirror with my face and hair made up, wearing a gown pinned along the back to showcase my every curve, I didn't just feel beautiful. I felt promising, as though I was worth so much more than my life had offered during those past 19 years. At one point during the photo shoot, I looked over at the Miss Appleton's representative charged with handling me for the week and asked her when I'd be signing my contract. I was only joking, but she looked up from her magazine, gave me the once-over, and told me that my chances would never be better than they were at that moment. Part of my contest winnings was a year's supply of Miss Appleton's Hair and Beauty Care products, which I sold for 3 months' rent in a ladies' boarding house. I never took my train back to Boston. When I called home to break the news, I couldn't get through to either of my parents, who were perpetually out working. My mother had barely been on speaking terms with me for the past year anyway, not since I helped my brother Seb leave for college. I had to leave a message with my sister, Jillian. I lied and said I'd be back in a month or so. I told her to keep an eye on our sisters until I got back. Every month, I called and I lied. It went on until eventually my sisters were given instructions not to accept calls from me anymore.
Thank you. And I just want to say that one of the really interesting things in this work of fiction is how you draw from real events. So just tell us about the trial that the book centers around.
Yeah, so the research for this book really, the structure of the book and the research really took off when I came across the 1943 trial of Errol Flynn, who is best known for playing Robin Hood. And it's a testament to the power of the studio system and how much control they had, that he went to trial for assaulting 2 underage girls. He was acquitted. People actually doubled down on their support of him because they really only knew what the studios told them. If the studios wanted to give out the message that this man was a hero, he was basically Robin Hood in real life, people for the most part were going to believe that. In his private life, he was just an absolute terrible person. He would get kicked out of parties for things like punching people's butlers. So I was shocked that this even made it to a trial, and just kind of went down the rabbit hole with it. And this research was done around 2018, so the Me Too movement was picking up steam. The resonances between then and today were eerily close, and eventually became Do Tell.
It's a historical novel with a whole lot of application for the world that we live in right now. It is a terrific book. Okay, my book is called Tom Lake, and it is set around Thornton Wilder's play Our Town, and it is about a woman named Laura who plays Emily in high school and then plays Emily in college. She gets scouted, she goes to Hollywood, and when Lindsay and I were first going out, she said, wouldn't it be fun if we both read the parts where our characters go off to Hollywood for the first time? And what I found is they were kind of exactly the same parts, which, considering that we were writing these books at the same time, is just nothing but weird. So part of the book takes place at Tom Lake, which is a summer stock theater company in northern Michigan that I made up in 1988, in which Laura is a rising star playing in Our Town. She has an affair with an actor named Peter Duke, and at the end of the summer, she stops acting, and Duke goes on to be the most famous actor of his generation. And then the other half of the story is set in 2020, during the pandemic, when Laura lives with her husband on a cherry orchard in northern Michigan, and their 3 daughters, who are all in their 20s, have come home to pick cherries and also to wait out the pandemic. And they demand that their mother tell them the story of when she was 24 and in love with Peter Duke. So this is the story of when Laura first goes to Hollywood. See if any of it sounds familiar. Go back to New Hampshire, to Bill Ripley sitting in that darkened university theater beside his sister. Ripley wasn't new to the game, and when he saw me, he understood what he was looking at. A pretty girl who wasn't so much playing a part as she was right for the part she was playing. Unlike his niece, I knew how to not ruin things. When I got off the plane in Los Angeles, a deeply tanned man in a black suit held up a clipboard with my name on it. He took the little duffel bag from my hand and walked me out to an honest-to-God limousine. You could have knocked me over with a feather, as my grandmother liked to say. Had he driven me around the airport and dropped me off in the exact same spot, and I had flown back to New Hampshire without ever seeing anything else of California, it would have been worth it, because someday I would be able to tell my children that I had ridden in a limousine. I rolled down the tinted window so that anyone straining to see who was in the back of the car would know it was me, basking in the sunshine. The hotel had a swimming pool. A small gift basket in my room contained fruits so foreign to me that I didn't know how to eat them. A note from Ripley read, "Welcome, please sign for all your meals at the hotel," which was nice enough, but hardly the same as, "Welcome, pick you up for dinner at 7. The hamburger I ordered from room service was brought to me beneath a great silver dome, which the waiter whisked away with a flourish. As far as I could tell, everything in California was something out of a movie. I ate a $15 hamburger in a big, white, fluffy bed and practiced my lines. The next morning, a different driver in a different limousine drove me to a soundstage at Warner Brothers. For 2 hours, people dressed me, undressed me, redressed me. I sat in a fancy barber's chair while a black man wearing a pink t-shirt that fitted him so exactly I was sure he had had it tailored took off the makeup I had so thoughtfully applied that morning and painted an entirely new face on top of my face. When he wanted me to lift my chin or turn to the left, he held his finger up in front of my face. "Follow my finger," he said, and so I did. "Eyebrows?" he asked the man sitting in the chair beside mine reading a script. The man looked at me in the mirror, and then he looked at the makeup artist. "Hold off," he said. A woman with hair as fine and colorless as corn silk and no eyebrows at all brushed my hair and then picked it up and poured it through her hands again and again. "Look at this," she said to her colleagues. "It's like a shampoo commercial." I kept thinking of that scene when Dorothy and her friends get spruced up before they're taken to meet the wizard. Pat, pat here, pat, pat there, and a couple of brand new straws. That's how we keep you young and fair. Merry old land of Oz. When their considerable efforts were complete and I had been transformed into someone that looked like my more attractive first cousin, I was taken onto a set where I stood in front of a white backdrop. The man who had been sitting in the barber chair next to mine took my picture. His praise was so obsequious that at first I felt embarrassed for myself, and then I felt embarrassed for him. Another man came in with a small camera on a tripod, and he had me say my name, Laura Kennison, and he had me say the name of the film, Singularity, and he had me say the part I was reading for, Lindsay. When all of that was done, they took me to the set's open space where Ripley was waiting with everyone else. So what I did in this book is all of the minor characters and the walk-ons are named for people in the bookstore. And so the scene that Lindsay asked me to read was the scene that...
Because I'm a raging narcissist.
You are a raging narcissist. It's unbelievable. We are going to go to questions, and before you do, I'm going to tell you something. One of my jobs, and I have a lot of them, is I am the spokesperson for independent bookstores, and I know you already know this about me, and I know you're all here at this beautiful literary festival that is running on the engine of independent bookstores, and you all know that you have to buy your books at the festival in order to keep the festival going, because the festival gets a portion of the sales, another thing that we know because we work at a bookstore, and also because you care about these stores and you care about your neighbors and your community and you want to keep them all thriving. And so you buy your books locally in the same way that you buy your yarn locally and your scotch locally and your zinnias locally. I mean, you know this, right? That's good. But the thing that you might forget is the other reason that I am out on book tour, which is a new Ann Patchett book comes out and people are going to buy it. It's been a long life, and I've published a lot of books, and I'm very appreciative. But the fact that these books came out 2 weeks apart really makes me think all the time, what if this was Tom Lake by Lindsay Lynch? Because the book's fine. It's getting really, really good reviews. It's at the top of the bestseller list, and that's because it's a book by Ann Patchett. And there is a whole career behind that. One of the things that's so important to me to do in my job as a bookstore owner is to remind people that careers are made by readers, and you need to take a chance on a writer that you maybe haven't heard of, on a book that's a first book, because Barbara Kingsolver once published a first book, and Stephen King once published a first book, and Louise Erdrich, and Ann Patchett, and all of us, Rick Russo and James McBride, who are my friends who I was just talking to in the back room, we forget that we all had a beginning and we all needed help and support. And so, friends, buy a first novel today. I will recommend Do Tell, but I bet that there are some other ones out there too. And that is the end of my public service announcement. Now, look, there's a question. Thank you very much. Okay. No, this is a lovely person who says that I am a great teacher because I tell people to push through. I will always remember years and years ago, I was on book tour, and a woman raised her hand and she was like, I teach creative writing in middle grade. How can I encourage my students without squashing them? You know, when they hand in things that are horrible, how do I encourage them to keep going? And I said, what if you were a math teacher and Jimmy said 2 + 2 is 6? Would you be like, wow, Jimmy, that shows so much vision. I just really appreciate your creativity and how you see things that maybe I hadn't seen before? I was like, squash that kid like a bug, man. That's how you learn, right? You've got to have somebody say, no, 2 + 2 is not 6, never will be 6. It is always going to be 4. And if the kid cries, the kid cries. I'm not a sensitive person. That's why I don't teach. Yeah, okay. Yes? God bless you. So she read the first chapter of Tom Lake, she put it down, she went to the library, and she reread Our Town. That's the point. That's the point. She recommended to her book club that they read Our Town. You can also watch Paul Newman do it on YouTube. You really can. And the wonderful thing about it is it's only going to take an hour and a half out of your life. And what a gift. If I do anything, if this book turns people back to Our Town, which has really been the seminal text of my life. I mean, the piece of literature that I love and go back to the most. And it reminds us that life is comprised of very small and unimportant and beautiful moments. And if we look away from that, we will miss our life. And that's what we've got. Yes?
I am wondering if you, kind of what the book, the kind of kernel that started this book for you, because it's about, there's Our Town, there's summer stock theater, there's the past and the way that we talk about the past, the things we tell and don't tell. So what, if you can even remember, what was the first little kernel that made you say,
What was the original kernel that made me read this book? It was Our Town. Somebody said to me, so at what point did you decide that Our Town was going to be the play that Laura was cast in? And I was like, no, it was always going to be a book about Our Town. And the first idea that I had, which I had back when I was writing The Dutch House, is what if a person at the end of her life realized that she had been happiest playing Emily in Our Town in high school. That was the first idea. That didn't stick, but it was always about Our Town. And I invited a bunch of neighbors over before I had the book in my head and had them do a cold read of the play. Oh, it was so great. And the amazing thing is only 2 of them had read it. I go through life thinking that everybody has read Our Town, but one of the things that I love about my life is I'm constantly telling people what to read, and I think that this is a book that tells people what to read, and it turns you to Thornton Wilder and to Chekhov and to Sam Shepard. Way to go. How are you guys in the balcony? Do you have anything that you need to talk about? You're good up there? Yes.
I
Okay, so have we had characters that get away from us and develop differently than we had intended? Go for it.
Oh, we can talk. Mine is my Nell. We both have Nells in our novels. My Nell is a much meaner Nell. But she's like this cutthroat actress, and something I was really frightened of in writing about this era is just how heavily mythologized it is. You really have these clear-cut tropes, which was a bit scary, especially when it came to a character like Nell, who very much fits like a Norma Shearer, Joan Crawford kind of trope. And I found that turned into my favorite thing writing about her was breaking down that trope. She changed so much over those drafts and just became such a more interesting, multifaceted character, especially when she was in isolation with Edie, because both of them are women who are very, very selfish in a time when women are not meant to be selfish.
Well, and also, Edie wasn't even the narrator. She wasn't the reason for the season when you first started.
No, the first time I tried it, it was a shifting third, and Edie was just an annoying person at a party.
But she kept sticking around and sticking around.
As she does.
And for me, the way I work is I do everything in my head for a long time. And when I have the book, then I write the book. So I change my mind about characters and what their relationships are and what happens and who's telling the story all the time. But once I buckle down and start typing, then things very rarely change. I actually can't abide the whole mythologizing that writers put forth so often of like, and then my characters just took over the novel and I was typing as fast as I can and they were just shocking. And I'm like, maybe I just write about very unambitious people who refuse to write the novel for me, but I am just writing that book myself, yeah. Was that a hand or were you just, no, I think you were just moving around a little bit. Okay, yes.
You have everything in your head before you start typing. Are you taking notes at all, or does your head contain an entire novel?
My head contains an entire novel. Sometimes I'll write things down and I'll have like lists of characters' names, endless lists of names, or reasons to set it in New Hampshire or reasons to set it in Michigan. But what I find is if I start writing things down, I get attached to the idea and I don't remain fluid in a period where I need to really be fluid. And people say, well, what if you forget? Which at this age, I am forgetting things all the time. But, it's like making friends. If we meet at a party and we like each other and let's have lunch, and we have lunch and I ask you about who you're married to or how many sisters you have or where you grew up, I don't go home and write those things down. If you forget something, you ask again, or you forget because it isn't interesting to you. And that's sort of the way I go into a novel, is I'm just trying to meet these people and figure them out. Yes?
And that just leads me, this is a comment, not a question, but I find what is remarkable about the canon of your work is the diversity. No storytellers, many times prolific authors, and I consider you prolific, prolific for a literary author.
John Updike, Joyce Carol Oates, Philip Roth. Okay, please, go ahead. She considers me prolific, I just wanted you to know. Thank you. Thank you.
But your subject matter is so vastly different. So with this question in your head, I just find, you're Bel Canto to Tom Lake, which I just finished and really enjoyed. But you're...
Yeah, well, okay, so there's just two ways to look at this. She's saying my subject matter is so different from novel to novel. Yeah, yes and no.
It's not formulated.
But it's also the same book over and over again, which is a group of strangers are thrown together and form a community, and that's probably 70% of literature. I don't feel bad about it.
Can I make you talk about pre- and post-Parnassus writing, though? Because I think there is a difference between pre- and post-Parnassus.
There is a difference between pre- and post-Parnassus. So I never wanted this bookstore. Never. Our bookstore is closed. I was introduced to somebody who wanted to open a bookstore, and she didn't have any money, and I was like, I'll bankroll you. You will work there, manage it. We'll have a 50-50 split. And that was great, and then she left, and I had to buy her out, and now I own the whole bookstore that I never wanted in the first place. But I love the bookstore, and I love these people that I work with, and it's a huge joy. And the weirdest thing that I cannot understand is that I have been so much more prolific since the store opened, and I am so much busier. But the thing is, I read fiction now the way you read the newspaper. All I read are books that won't be out for 4 or 5 months. And I have such a sense of what our customers want and what I want and what I feel is missing. And also, I want good books. And this is a really hard thing to talk about, but before I owned a bookstore, I believed all books were good. I would read Eudora Welty, and then I would read Henry James, and then I would read Laurie Moore, and then I would read Toni Morrison, and then I would read David Foster Wallace, and then I would read James Baldwin, and then I would read James McBride, and then I would, and I just went around from one unbelievably great book to the next unbelievably great book, the books of my friends, the books that got great reviews, the books that people recommended to me. And it would be like as if you were a painter and you never left the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and you just went from one wing to one wing to one wing. But when you open a bookstore and somebody sends you maybe 5 books a day to your house and to the store, don't send me any books. Do you hear me? Like when you come up to the signing table, don't give me any books, don't mail them to me, I don't want any more books. Books. When you open a bookstore, you realize that a lot of books aren't good. And I always say it's the difference. Before I opened a bookstore, if I wanted a gold bracelet, I'd go to Tiffany's and buy a gold bracelet. Once I opened a bookstore, if I wanted a gold bracelet, I would go to Alaska and kneel in a muddy, shallow creek with a pie tin and start looking for little flecks of gold. But the great thing is, when you find that fleck of gold, it's actually much more rewarding than going in and buying the gold bracelet. Amazing books are out there. Amazing books are being published all the time. They just happen to be cosseted within piles of books that are mediocre or just flat out not good. Sorry to be the one to break the news about that. So anyway, it's very inspiring. I do feel like I really want to write things that are good. Yes?
Featured Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep as the audiobook narrator. Can you tell us about how that came to be?
Sure. So Tom Hanks read The Dutch House. I knew him because I had interviewed him as an author at an event for his collection of short stories, and our lives got kind of intertwined for a while. And which made it sound like there was something weird going on, but there was nothing weird going on. And I asked him if he would record the audiobook, never in a million years thinking that he would say yes, and he said yes. And that audiobook was spectacular. And so when I finished this book, it's about a woman with 3 daughters, and Meryl Streep's voice was the voice in my head, and she has 3 daughters. And Meryl Streep's voice is the voice in everybody's head. That's not me. And I had met her 15 years ago. We had lunch. There was a period of about 7 minutes where she wanted to play Roxanne Koss in the movie A Bel Canto, and that didn't work out. And my agent is Felicity Blunt, who is the sister of Emily Blunt, and Felicity is married to Stanley Tucci, who played Meryl's husband in Julie and Julia. And so I wrote to Felicity, and I said, if I send a note to Meryl, would you send it to her? And she said, no, here's her email. And I wrote to her, and I'm really a big believer in super short emails, so I gave just the tiniest description of the book. I said, is there any way you would do this? And she wrote back, and she said, I am so honored you would think of me. It was like, really, because we've all only been thinking of you. And she agreed to do it without having read the book. And I got to go to the recording. I was there for the first 2 days, and Meryl Streep is every single thing you think Meryl Streep is going to be, as is Tom Hanks, actually. Spectacularly nice people. And if I ever write another book, no, I have no idea who'll do the audiobook. Hey, up there. Hey, balcony.
We talked about Lindsay's cover on her book. Could you tell us a little bit about how your cover?
Yes. How did I get to the cover of Do Tell? Oh, wait.
Tom
Damn,
Tell.
I keep doing that.
Tom Lake.
I keep doing that. Tom Lake, that's the one I wrote. Yes. So a year ago last May, I was giving a talk at the American Library in Paris, and my husband and I went to the Orangerie and turned a corner and saw this painting, which is by Gustave Caillebotte, and it's a decorative panel, and it's oriented this way with the blank space at the bottom because there was going to be a chest that was in front of the decorative panel, and why cover it with daisies when there's just going to be a chest in front of it? So there was this empty space, and I saw the painting, and I looked at my husband, and I said, that's the cover of my next book. And I was halfway through the book at the time, and if you read the book, you will understand why it makes sense. But when they sent me, so I bought the postcard at the gift shop and sent it to the art department, and my editor was like, hey, I haven't finished the book, but this is the cover, which is the way you get a good cover. You just tell them, this is the cover. And when they sent me the mock-up, it was oriented like this. And I said, no, I want it oriented like this. This should be at the bottom. And my editor said, well, we can't do that because the shelving at Target has a lip on it, which means that you lose the bottom 15% of the cover, which that would mean your name would be chopped off. And so the book is oriented like this. But it is a beautiful cover, and my gosh, when you start signing thousands of books, you really appreciate a nice cover. Here's another thing that you know when you're a bookseller, and this is interesting because you're in the middle. Glossy books, and this is now, this was not 10 years ago. Glossy books are commercial fiction. Matte books are literary fiction. I wanted the Dutch house to be glossy because it was such a beautiful painting that my friend Noah Soderstrom did and is hanging in my house. And paintings look better glossy, you know, if you think about an art catalog. And they really fought me. They were like, no, I mean, that's going to make you look like a beach read. And I said, I want it glossy. The book did well, and now my covers are glossy. Lindsay, you're having it both ways, because you've got a matte back and glossy letters.
I didn't ask for it. They just did that. I'm just happy to have a cover, man.
It's the best of all possible worlds. Okay, we're going to have one more question. It's going to be you. What type of setting do I like to write in? Why don't you take that one?
The main thing that comes to mind is just I have a standing desk that can also be a sitting desk, but no matter what, there's a dog bed under the desk, and my dog sleeps on my feet when I write.
Barnabas nails are into place. And I wrote this book entirely on a treadmill desk, which was, so I was walking the whole time, and it was fantastic because there are all of these studies that we're more creative if we're walking. Okay, friends, we're going to go to the signing tent where we will die a terrible death, and you will always be able to say, Ann Patchett and Lindsay Lynch, I was the last one to see them alive. Thank you very much.
Thank you.